Good afternoon. This is Sandra with Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. Thank you for joining us today for our monthly Lunch and Learn. This month, we are going to talk about sexual assault forensics exams. I said that wrong. Sexual assault forensic exams. And we're going to talk about what they are, what to expect, what your options are. And joining us today is one of our staff attorneys, Chris Quaisbarth, Heather Amador from the Governor's Office of, I'm going to have you say it, from the Governor's Office, and Jessica Volz with Adventist Healthcare. I'm going to do a quick round robin for you guys to introduce yourselves, and then we'll hop right in. Chris?
Okay, thank you, Sandra. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. My name is Chris Quaisbarth. I'm a lawyer with the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. I've been there for over 9 years. And in my legal experience, I spent 20 years as a prosecutor before this, and a decade doing other things before that time. And so it's my pleasure to work with victims through criminal cases, helping them understand their rights and helping them protect their rights that they have in Maryland. So thank you for having me here today.
Thanks, Chris. Heather?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heather Amador. I am the Director of Victim Services Policy and Programs at the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. I've been with the office a little over 7 years, and prior to that, I spent a little over 21 years at the Anne Arundel County State's Attorney's Office, where I was a victim advocate and then the Director of Victim Services.
Thanks, Heather. Jessica?
Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Volz. I currently serve as the Clinical Director of the Forensic Medical Unit at Shady Grove Medical Center in Rockville, Maryland. And I've been in that role for almost 10 years now, and I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I'm experiencing some lag. I think we're having some issues with the platform that we're using. We're going to try to push through, and hopefully we don't have to redo this, because I think that this information is really interesting and helpful. One of our goals is to have searchable information that is available to those who may need it when they are in times of crisis. So again, hopefully the lag isn't too awful today for those of you at home. One of the reasons why we wanted to talk about this is because sexual assault occurs and people are in a traumatic space, and it's hard for them to make decisions. So we wanted to make sure that this information was available. And even as putting this together, I have learned so much from all of you that I feel like, it'll be up to you guys to make sure that all of the information that you already tried to tell me is relayed to those at home. So one of the first things that we wanted to talk about were barriers and deterrents to getting a sexual assault forensic exam done. In talking to Heather, she shared a lot of information.
We've lost you, Sandra.
I can just kind of jump in. I think that the direction she was going was about the barriers that sometimes folks face. And I think the biggest barrier is honestly knowledge, especially younger people or any of our immigrant community might not know that the program even exists. We have a lot of concerns sometimes related to whether college students, especially those maybe coming into Maryland from out of state, understand that our program might be different than even the program that they had regarding reimbursement back in their home states or home countries. And I think really education or getting information out about the availability of services is probably the biggest barrier that we have. We do try to attend any type of training events or community events that we can to make the world and the state aware of the services that Maryland has to offer. We have a phenomenal forensic nursing community and care really in, I think 23 of the 24 jurisdictions in our state. I happen to live in the one county without a hospital. So there is one county in the state without a hospital. So there is no forensic nursing program here, but there is forensic nursing, I believe, in every other jurisdiction of the state. And we do try to participate, like I said, in any types of community activities or services that can spread the word and get it out there. And just like on a personal note, just anyone that is comfortable doing so, at the beginning of every school year, I try to put something out, just even on my own social media, letting college kids know and young people know about the availability of forensic exams.
But, and thank you, Heather. And those things are important. And Sandra, while you were off, Heather jumped in and started talking about barriers for people. And getting that information out is so important. And I'm glad that we're having this event today that people can participate in and can find our website and look at this video in the future as well. There is a lot of information available on the internet for people to access. Of course, crime victims don't know they're going to be crime victims. So people are not preparing in advance, necessarily. And I understand, the topic that we have today, most of the people who are going to need a sexual assault forensic exam or considering them will be women. There will be men as well, but most of them will be women. And I hope that anybody watching here today is not offended by my being a man participating here today. I tried to be as open and receptive for my female clients as well and participate. And I know that there's a lot of, as I said, websites available listing hospitals in Maryland that have safe programs that people can go to, other information that will be useful as well. So thank you, Heather, for identifying the work that you all are doing as well.
And just from the nursing perspective and the healthcare perspective and feedback that I've received from patients and some research, that I've done, I think that there are barriers to accessing these sexual assault forensic exams that are related to cost. Heather is going to talk about that in a little while. How much does going to the hospital is expensive. And Heather and her program, they've done a great job in being partners to make sure that is not a barrier. But I'll let her take the lead on that. The other pieces, I think, are a little bit more personal. So there's this idea, of I don't know where to go. So that's kind of a logistic thing. I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. That's a logistic thing. And we can provide you with those resources through this webinar and online. But I do want to kind of also pause for a minute and talk about the personal pieces, the patients, the fears that they have. I had the opportunity to actually kind of learn about this in a more formal way by doing some research on our patient population with a colleague. And one of the things was patients said, "Not now. I'm just not ready." And not ready meant I'm not ready to engage with any help-seeking system. And so one of the things that I want to talk about is kind of understanding that nurses understand that there is a kind of healing process that happens. And I think, Chris, you talked about being trauma, the trauma piece and feeling that shock. So I just want to, acknowledge that sometimes people aren't ready to participate in one of these exams right away. And we've worked really closely, the forensic nurses across the state, with GOCPP and have expanded the amount of time that's available to be reimbursed for people to get those services, to come in for a sexual assault forensic exam. I have to put a little star here with a word of caution that, you know, if evidence collection, like biologic evidence collection, DNA, right? The what some people refer to in the community as the rape kit, if that is the goal, that DNA evidence, it does go away over time. So it's time sensitive, but that doesn't mean that if someone waits 3 or 4 or 5 days, that means they can't get an exam, that they can't seek care. So just encouraging people to get the word out there that just because this is something that happens and maybe you or the person you're supporting needs a little bit of time to process before going to the hospital, that's okay. And the system is designed to accommodate that within 15 days. The other piece that I just like to acknowledge as a barrier is people's perception that getting a sexual assault exam is going to be hurtful to them, meaning that that the nursing staff, the nurse that's taking care of them, is going to call the police, and maybe you're not ready to call the police, and you feel like that's going to be harmful to you, or that all of your choices are going to be taken away from you with the care decisions, like what medications to take. And that's, I just want to make sure that barrier there's some reality to that, right? Because there are certain things that, and we'll talk a little bit about like what we call mandatory reporting, but for the most part, all of this control of the exam really is in the hands of the patient. And then there's this other category kind of that I think about where people are worried that it's going to harm other people in their lives. And they look at coming in for a sexual assault exam as taking a first step toward reporting, and that might hurt other people. What I would say is just know that you are in control if you come in for an exam, and that my experience in working with nurses across the state, forensic nurses across the state, is that they really do have a very good sense of making sure that you know what your options are around accessing care in the very beginning so that you can make informed decisions. So when I think about barriers, I kind of think about the logistics piece, as I said, and then also just that personal piece. And if you have questions about that, there are great resources, and the forensic nurses are one of them, to kind of help you walk through addressing those barriers instead of just thinking, this is my barrier, and so I'm just not going to ask any more questions or pursue anything. And just one more piece about kind of the where to go, because I think that's another barrier, is people don't know where to go. We talked about there are 23, I believe, hospitals across the state that provide these services. So not only can you initially access these exams by just going to the hospital that's nearest you that offers these exams, but police are also an option for starting that process. And victim advocates are also a really great place to start that process. So I just wanted to kind of put, from a nursing perspective, those pieces out there of the complexity of, we recognize completely that this is a really complicated time for people, and making sure that we're being there in the way that's most helpful.
And Jessica, if I could ask you just to follow up on that, and victims or survivors, we use the word victims in the law in Maryland, but people are survivors of offenses as well. Forensic nurses are specially trained, correct, to be accommodating of people who have suffered trauma. Am I right on that?
Yes, there is a specialized training and skill set that goes along with this that really is beyond things like knowing how to, collect DNA or give medications for sexually transmitted infections. They're trained in a more comprehensive way that gives us an understanding of kind of what the some of the rules and are, like I said, about, when we have to report to police or when we don't, and what options for care are available. It's a specialty.
All right, thank you. And you also mentioned victim advocates. And I don't know if it's every hospital or many of the hospitals, advocates can be available even during that process for survivors, if I'm correct about that.
The goal is definitely to make sure people feel comfortable. And so just like you go to the hospital and maybe you, for any reason, and you'd like a support person, if that's a family member or someone in a more formal role, I can speak to in our program, and then maybe Heather, you can speak from the victim advocacy perspective, but we really do think it's important that patients, we know the healthcare piece of it, but victim advocates, they know a lot about the rest, like what happens outside of the hospital walls. That's not our area of expertise, but making sure people have that connection and access to someone who does have that expertise is really important. Heather, I don't know if you want to share what that expertise is.
Yeah. So we actually, GoCap actually provides a lot of funding. That's one of our chief purposes. We fund a lot of different types of programs, including the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We obviously provide funding there, but also to all of the local rape crisis centers. And many, I would say probably most of those programs do actually have or provide a service that would be typically called hospital accompaniment, which a survivor could opt into having an advocate accompany them to the hospital. I think, it varies the level of services and the hours of coverage from location to location. But many of the programs do provide that service as well, and all provide additional types of advocacy outside of the hospital, including sometimes sexual assault legal services, other types of know your rights type of information, and definitely anything related to counseling or any type of mental health recovery as well.
So it's kind of great because when you work with a victim advocate to get to, the forensic exam, if that's your goal, if you work with police first, if you come into the hospital first, the goal, all of our collective goal, I feel pretty safe in saying this, is to work as a team to support you and make sure that you are doing this in a way that feels comfortable to you.
Thanks for sharing that, Jessica. And so sorry about my computer issues. I don't know what's going on, but I'm on my cell phone now. And I know that from, I've done some exploratories with other nonprofits that work in this area, and they do have someone that'll like meet you at the hospital and kind of do those steps. We've also gone hand in hand with them, offering our legal services for the legal part, and we can talk about that towards the end. I know that Chris will have a bunch to share about that, but we have done that with a lot of our local organizations, just because they don't have, just like you said earlier, like what we do is we do the legal stuff. And so, we always try to work with our partners, regardless of, area, since we do all of Maryland. So, and we can, again, chat about that shortly. Okay.
And I think just to follow up there, I think, as Jessica indicated, people will need to feel comfortable. The timing, what's appropriate for them is going to be important. And she noted, also forensic evidence can be time sensitive. So there could be, some importance. But as the procedure is described, even if you don't want to go to the police immediately and you want to get that health examination, to take care of injuries that you have, or to get other health treatment that you might need because you've been assaulted sexually. That's encouraged to do that as quickly as possible, and you can hold off on the police stuff for a later time. And that's not just an informal thing, it's a matter of law that you don't have to go forward, with exceptions about mandatory reporting for children and maybe vulnerable adults or others that Jessica might talk about.
Chris, you just mentioned something that regarding the timeliness that I really wanted to highlight as well. And that is GOCAP also will cover the expenses related to NPEP medications, or non-occupational post-exposure prophylaxis medications. Such a critical window of time to start those medications, and they are so critical in preventing the contraction of HIV. So if you are a victim of sexual assault and think you may have been exposed to HIV, that, I think, Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a 72-hour window in which to begin those medications to keep your viral load down and keep the virus from increasing in the body. So time is of the essence for some things, but it's not always restrictive for others.
Yeah, sooner is definitely always better than later for a couple of reasons. It's better for, like Heather said, starting HIV preventative medications. HIV is the virus that causes AIDS. Sexually transmitted infection testing, I'd argue that we could probably wait a little bit longer on that. Emergency contraception, so this is a medication that can prevent a woman from becoming pregnant. That medication, depending on the medication, is a 3 to 5 day window. So 72 to 120 hours. And then DNA evidence, depending on the type of assault. Some is within 24 hours. So oral DNA can only be collected, so from the mouth, for 24 hours. For other types of collection, for example, for vaginal specimens, we can collect for, there's literature to say, meaning like in the science, it says 5 days. Some actually goes out and says, we collect in our hospital for up to 15 days. But what happens is, if you picture, the ability to successfully retrieve DNA, collect DNA is up here, right when the sexual assault happens. It kind of goes like this, down to 0 over a period of days. And so sooner is better than later for those reasons. However, I just also always like to encourage people and say, but if that doesn't, if you have all of this information, that's my goal. If you feel for whatever reason that you can't come in today and you can come in tomorrow, as long as you have that information, you're making an educated decision about that. Only you know what's best for you. And so, Heather, I really do appreciate you pointing out that there are other factors that are time sensitive, because we definitely would want to acknowledge that too.
And Jessica, factors that could affect the ability to collect evidence would include, just the body dispelling things, bathing, eating, other things. Just the longer the time lapse, the more difficult it might be to get that evidence. But the primary thing is making sure that the survivor of the assault is feeling safe and protected, regardless of that timeline.
You were much more eloquent at saying that than I was. Thank you.
I thought you did a wonderful job.
Thanks for that. And, I'm so sorry. I feel like the time that I missed with you guys chatting, I feel like I'm trying to play catch up. And I know that we wanted to talk about, so you'll just have to correct me. Did you guys talk about the being anonymous as far as young people and their parents?
Okay, because that was one of the things that when we were talking about deterrence is if it's a young person, right? And it's a, 16-year-old or maybe a young person at college and something happens, they're, so worried about what parents or what the family thinks about them, that some of those, things become barriers for them seeking help. And I know that Heather and I talked about this, and so I wanted to bring that back up as far as what our state of Maryland covers, and how they can remain anonymous and just those benefits.
Yeah, that one of the things I think when you were off, I mentioned is that I even try to put it out on my own personal social media around the time that school starts back, because I know that we have a large, college influx coming into our state, maybe from other states where things are handled differently. If they know a sexual assault reimbursement program exists at all, I know they exist, obviously in other states, but it doesn't mean that college kids know anything about that. And I think the biggest thing about college is it's your first real stab at independence, and you're kind of learning the ropes of how to adult on your own, and navigating something like this um, with or without support is traumatic. Whether you have great support or not, there's always going to be a sense of trauma. So getting information out there as much as possible is critical. And Sandra, to your point about anonymity, there you do have the ability in Maryland to receive an exam, receive the care that you need, and not report at all, not engage with law enforcement at all. You truly can be, other states call them VAWAs. Sometimes we call them Jane Does, or just anonymous kits here in Maryland. You aren't going to miss out on any services by not wanting to report or not wanting to provide your information. And you will never receive a bill in Maryland for your sexual assault services. Those bills come to the Sexual Assault Reimbursement Unit at GOCAP for reimbursement. So there is this ability to be anonymous, and even being anonymous, the state of Maryland also now has a sexual assault evidence kit tracking system that you can access. Basically, when you have your evidence collected at a Maryland hospital, you will be given a card that has the information on it for your kit. You are in no way entered into that tracking system, just the kit number. And then you can track that kit externally and watch it be picked up from the hospital by law enforcement. And if you've decided that you don't want your kit tested, it will go to storage. You could at some point decide to have that kit tested and watch the kit move throughout the system. So it is a fully anonymous system, and you do not have any personally identifying information for the patient or victim going into that system. So even the anonymity stretches that far as well.
That's great. We talked about insurance as well, which I think that's all inclusive in remaining anonymous. So it's something that young people out there can get the help that they need, and then they can cross the bridges that they're ready for when they're ready. So
Heather,
that's fantastic.
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
That's-
Sandra.
No, go ahead, Chris.
Heather, you spoke about the kit, and the kit is where all this evidence is contained that's collected from a safe exam. And what's the length of time? Do you know that that kit would be available for somebody to track if they didn't want to move forward immediately, or they want to remain anonymous for a period of time?
It's been a couple years since I've looked at the actual number, but it's a very high year count, like 75 or 80 or something like that. Isn't it, Jessica?
Years.
I thought it was 75. Yeah. I think it was originally proposed in the bill as 80, and like they shaved 5 years off, which is funny to me. But yeah, it is basically forever. Obviously, unless you're, maybe a toddler or something, the kit's existence will probably outlive most victims and survivors.
Right. So somebody could come back in the future, especially if they're young and didn't want to do something now, but later they feel more comfortable, stronger to move forward. They have that.
Absolutely. I think for some survivors, it's like the timing just doesn't feel right. When I worked in a court setting, I would hear very regularly, like, especially from college age kids, like, I had finals the next week and I just couldn't. I just couldn't like waste any mental energy on an interview when I had finals, or Sometimes you'll have someone who's caring for a relative on hospice care and just does not have the emotional or mental capacity to devote to themselves, but they can revisit it and come back and request testing later or an interview later or police reporting later. All of those things can happen at a later date.
And those practical barriers are important. It could be, like you said, exams or, work or something like that. There could be emotional barriers, guilt. So many survivors.
Cultural. We see a lot of cultural.
A lot of cultural. Especially with young people, college people, there could have been alcohol involved. Was I doing enough to protect myself, or is the offender a family member of some sort, and you want to stay safe within your family? All of those could be barriers. And so the law has provided that ability for people to move forward and still keep themselves protected and anonymous if they want to.
If I can just add to that, so kind of a summary that I like to give to our patients is that the exam, so going to the hospital, the exam, the care that you get that day is free. The HIV preventative medication, if you choose to do that, it's also free. If you choose to have sexually transmitted infection testing and treatment, it's free. If you choose to have emergency contraception, it's also free. Also, some of the follow-up care for 90 days that is related to the sexual assault, and this is a great thanks to Heather and the program over there, is also covered. So, we present our patients with 3 options for care. One is what we call medical only. It's not like, oh, medical only. It's saying, I only want medical care, right? I'm not here for the other stuff today. Doesn't mean you can't change your mind later. Doesn't mean you feel pressure. You don't feel pressure to go home. Chris, I love how you said some things are kind of like big things, right? And other things are kind of logistic things like, I have to go home and let my dog out. I came right here from work. So I get it. You're not going to be able to be present here with me if you're thinking about your poor dog that's running around because it has to go to the bathroom. So we acknowledge those things. So one is medical care, meaning that you want to be evaluated and talk about maybe taking those medications. You maybe have or don't have injury. Maybe you have questions about injury. All of those pieces is kind of what we call medical only. And those are also covered if they're related to the sexual assault. Heather, is that okay? Option 2 is what we call the anonymous report, right? But it's not actually a report. What it is it's an anonymous exam. So you have all of the medical care and you say, I want a kit collected. I do or do not want photographs of injuries. I do or do not want toxicology testing, those types of things. So again, you're kind of going through and you're talking with the nurse about what you are and are not comfortable with doing, what you do want done. And if we do collect that kit and a chart, and we maybe do or do not do photographs, the kit, like Heather said, it's put in this tracking system, but on the outside is none of your information. So it's stored, it's safe. And I like to tell patients, I like to think about it like you have it in your back pocket, meaning that it's time sensitive to collect. You might never use it, and that's your choice. And you might wake up tomorrow, 5 days from now, or 50 years from now. Literally, it could be 50 years from now based on the retention, right? How long we keep that kit in the state. And you could say, today's the day. I feel like I need to do this. And you have it. So that is the anonymous option. And you might hear us talking about mandatory reporting, and Chris kind of high level hit on it and said it's like kids and vulnerable adults. And so basically what it is without getting too detailed, we're talking about things like, you know, parents, people who are responsible for a child, so a teacher, those types of scenarios. Those are the ones, and we would talk about that before we even do the kit. So I don't want that to be like hanging out there as a fear. That's something that the forensic nurses can definitely talk to you about, educate you about. And if you are an adult that is not a vulnerable adult, most likely it doesn't apply to you. And then, so that's the anonymous exam. And then there's the third option, which is everything. So it's basically the medical care, the kit if you want the kit, the sexual assault kit. It's the photographs if you want the photographs. It's the toxicology testing if you want the toxicology testing. And you're saying, and I do want to report to police. And if you haven't already, then we help connect you with the police so that you can make that report. And if you have already done that, it's basically signing a paper that says that kit that you're collecting, you want your name on the outside and you want the police to have possession of that. And we have 30 days to get that kit to them, whether it's anonymous or not. So those are kind of the three options. And Chris, you said something else that kind of caught my ear that I thought, oh, I didn't talk about that as a barrier. You can access all of this regardless of whether or not you remember what happened to you. And I say that especially for people who are worried that maybe I'm not going to be believed, or I have to know everything that happened to me to get care at the hospital, or I have to know everything that happened to me for Heather's group to cover the bill. That's absolutely not true. A lot of people have gaps in their memory or don't remember their sexual assault at all. So I would still encourage you to seek care if you are in that category.
And thanks for touching on that again, Jessica, because not remembering, and people could have fears of moving forward. Oh, if I don't remember what happened, maybe I shouldn't go forward, or I can't get treatment. But trauma affects memories. So even, just having something horrible happen to you can affect your memory. There could be substance abuse, whether it was voluntary or involuntary, because so many survivors have been drugged by somebody, maybe a date or somebody at a bar that slipped in beside them, put something in their drink. So those things can affect memories as well. And certainly we encourage everybody to move forward. Sandra, I think that maybe before we run out of time, you want to have somebody talk about kind of the details of what happens, maybe not details, but a little more structure of how evaluations work.
Yeah, I mean, Jessica definitely can touch as to, I think we were going to talk about the consent form guide, and we did talk about some of the options and where to go. So I think that I had a couple follow-up questions was, how long has it been? Because Jessica and I talked about this as well. So it's 75 years that they keep this kit around. How long has that been the rule? Has it been some time already, or?
I think it's been about 4 years.
Okay.
That's just a guess. It's been since I've been at GoCap. I'll put it to you that way. And I've been at GoCap for 7 years. I
Okay.
know that before then, I think it was 20 years. I think we retained
Okay,
kits,
so
if I remember
still a
correctly.
good amount of time.
Yeah.
So, which I think is fantastic. I think it's great. It kind of allows you some space. It allows us overthinkers to overthink all that we want to do, the what ifs and all those things. 75 years is a long time to overthink something. And so let's say, 20 years pass, and finally you're like, man, you know what? This has been eating at me for 20 years. I'm a grown up now. Here I am. I want to do this, right? There's got to be something going on. Who do they reach out to like act like where do you go to say, hey, I did this 20 years ago and now I'm ready to do something?
My recommendation, if someone asked me from the collector standpoint, like we're the people who collect the kit, I would say your best bet would be to call the police, the non-emergency number, or go to a police station. You can report that way. Or, and Heather, I'll let you and Chris talk a little bit about how to engage with a victim advocate if you haven't in a very long time or ever. But those would be my top two places.
Yes, I actually did look it up just to see, and it looks like that law passed on October 1st of 2023 to retain the kits for a significantly longer period of time of 75 years, and it was the retention period before that was 20 years. But regarding engaging with an advocate, each jurisdiction does have a rape crisis center and advocacy organization that will help crime victims of sexual assault to engage with services. Again, that can be everything from figuring out how to report now that you've had some time to process it and decided that the time was right for you, if ever, and help walk you through that, but also receive any care and services that you need related to that. Because some people are really, really good at compartmentalizing and taking something traumatic that happens to them and just kind of putting it into a small box in the corner of their brain and leaving it there. And it could come back and into the forefront of their mind at any point and change their position or perspective on reporting. And so you might really have an emotional response significantly far removed from the actual event. Some people are really, really good at compartmentalizing. So those rape crisis services are available to survivors at any time.
Perfect.
Yeah, and those are great resources. And Heather, yeah, I was looking at the statute and I saw the amendments of 2023 and 2024. So I knew it was one of those 2 years. But the police are a good place to start. And I can't speak to every police agency in Maryland. I work in Frederick and Montgomery counties in particular. But both of those police agencies have victim assistance in those agencies to help people through if somebody starts with a police agency. The rape crisis centers that you mentioned are a good place to start. We have people call the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center on a regular basis saying something happened to me when I was a kid and I'm an adult now. Can you help me go forward? Some people had gone to the police perhaps early on and decided, I just can't do this now. And years later, they come back. And maybe the police agency is the best place for them to start at that point because they already had an investigation conducted at that point. So all good resources for people to be able to reach out and come back at a later time.
Okay, and then they'll know what to. I mean, they're pros, right? Everybody's just learning a little bit more today, like 20 years ago, and all the good things. Okay, so I guess that brings us right into Chris. It's falls in your court, my friend. Someone's decided, hey, you know what? I'm gonna seek that justice I deserve and ready to rock and roll. And they call up, and we have advocates that handle as well at Maryland Crime Victims. What they call, they do an intake with us. What should they expect legally, and what kind of options do they have, Chris, as far as court?
Well, we're talking. Maybe somebody calls us and they haven't done anything. Certainly, if the offense was something that just happened, we'd encourage them to seek out medical assistance if they need that. Assuming they've gone through the process, maybe the police have already been contacted, maybe there's an investigation and a complaint has been filed and there's a criminal case involved. We can certainly help them through that process. The evidence that was collected at the safe would have been tested, should have been tested, and that could have important DNA evidence that would identify perhaps who the offender is, whether that was from bodily fluids or skin cells, things under your fingernail could be evidence as well, photographs of the injuries that were suffered, whether they were bruises or abrasions or more severe injuries. All of that could be important evidence that's used in the trial process. And certainly the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, we would certainly make sure that the victim is treated with dignity, sensitivity, and respect through that process, through the court system and with agents of the state. Certainly they're being treated with respect and dignity and sensitivity through the hospital process, and with advocates as well. And if the case goes to trial, certainly the survivor probably will have to testify at trial, but there will be experts to come in. The forensic nurse may be a witness at the trial. People from the police lab who conducted the DNA testing would come in. So the survivor is not testifying about those things. There's experts that are coming through to testify at those things in court.
All right. That is it for questions that I had. Was there anything, I guess we can go through, and was there anything that you guys think that we missed that we want to throw out there? I feel like that's such a huge topic.
The only thing that I would add is, as far as kind of what happens during the exam, what you can expect when you're there at the hospital sitting with the nurse, is that, again, I can't say it enough, you have choices, right? The goal is to make sure you have control over your care and that you're making informed decisions. That means it's the nurse's job to educate you, and then you make the choice. You can expect a brief history taking. You can expect someone asking you about your medical history and medicines that you take. You can expect that they're going to ask you about what brought you to the hospital. What happened to bring you here today? And the reason they ask that is because they need to know where to, what we call, focus our assessment, right? Where do I need to look? What do I need to offer you as far as testing for sexually transmitted infections? Are you at risk for contracting HIV? Is that a conversation we need to have? For example, if it's an oral assault, and there's no vaginal penetration, we're going to have the conversation that emergency contraception probably isn't necessary for you, right? So that's why the nurse is asking those questions. And then they're going to also use that to, if you want a kit collected, to determine where to collect and what they're potentially collecting for. So what that collection looks like is, again, in collaboration between the nurse and the patient. That looks like using Q-tips to swab areas on skin surfaces, in the mouth. And then when it comes to the genital exam, it really is very similar to a GYN exam, where an instrument called a speculum is used, again, only with your consent, so that the internal structures of the genitals can be examined, and we can collect that way. There shouldn't be any part other than drawing blood of the exam that's painful to you. So that's kind of what you can expect. We do also offer to take photographs in case there are injuries or lack of injuries, which is also totally normal. So if you or someone you know are thinking, well, I don't think, I think that I was sexually assaulted. I don't remember what happened, but I don't have any injury. You can still come in for an exam. You can still talk to us. It's very common to not have injury. You can remember what happened to you and still not have injury. So that's pretty much, like, from start to finish what you can expect.
Jessica, let me just ask you, if somebody shows up at the emergency room and they're not, the safe exam is not taken just in an emergency room where anybody else is walking past, is it? Is there a more secure location in many hospitals, at least?
In many hospitals, if not all, I would definitely not say that I'm familiar with every one of the 23 sites, but regardless of where you go, your privacy is top priority. In our hospital, like many others, there's a whole separate unit with a locked door. It's a separate space. It's very quiet, where the nurse can really work with you. So thank you for mentioning that, because that is definitely a concern.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you, Jessica. All right, so we've got about 6 minutes left. Last remarks, I'll do a round robin here. We'll give Jessica a break. Let's start with Heather.
Yeah, the last thing I will say, and it's kind of piggybacking off of some of the things that Chris and Jessica just said, is sometimes we're swabbing for things that are not in the genital region. Sometimes we are swabbing, like having swabs for bite marks or places that might be on other parts of your body. And I think sometimes that can be a little confusing for victims, not realizing that that might be another place that we can collect DNA. We also talk pretty regularly in our a lot of our sexual assault evidence kit policy and funding committee meetings about the fact that a lot of times when victims go in, they think that they don't have the control that Jessica talked about. They think that this is going to be a very standard practice, and I'm going to have to, if I want an exam, if I want anything done, all of these other things are going to happen. And I think that's probably a really important message to reiterate, that that really the victim should be in control of the services that they are receiving, and that they should be able to feel comfortable voicing their opinion about what they are willing and are not willing to have happen. It is such a traumatic experience that giving them some control in that. And again, like I think it was both Chris and Jessica said it as well. When it comes to not having memories, when I was at the state's attorney's office, I had cases where people would say, my body just didn't feel right. I was in whatever the situation was, and when I woke up the next day, just something didn't feel right about my body. Or my clothing was not on correctly, or there was products on my skin, like somebody cleaned my skin with bleach or other cleaning products. I've seen all of those types of cases where people come in not really sure what happened, but it was really important for them to both have the opportunity to have evidence collected if they wanted, and also potentially receive care.
Thanks, Heather.
And those things are important. And certainly the primary interest that we've been talking about is making sure that the survivor feels safe, feels protected, get the medical care that you need, seek out the counseling care that you may be interested in. Even if you don't get it immediately, at least you can get some referrals. But if you're thinking about having evidence collected, be careful to go as soon as you can. Try to avoid bathing, try to avoid eating, drinking, urinating if you can. Bring the clothing with you. Wear the clothing if you can, because there could be forensic evidence on that from the offender. If there are other objects around, something happened, on a piece of furniture or on a bed, sheets can be valuable pieces of evidence as well, or towels. Those are things that you can bring with you. You don't have to bring it right away, but if you're thinking about it, those are things that can be helpful for evidence to be collected.
Thanks, Chris. Jessica?
I think the only thing that I would add is that, again, the kit, if you don't report to police, it is put anonymously, kind of stored by the police, but it's anonymous. If having that kit tested, that's part of an investigation. And so, we have 30 days to get those kids to the police. Heather, I don't know if you have anything else to add around that, but just
The only
Yeah.
other thing about that is the tracking system, I think, is really helping to make sure that things are moving along appropriately. The tracking system will account for where evidence originates and then also watching it move through the system. The administrator of the tracking system, who is located in GoCap, actually gets alerts when a piece of evidence or the kid has been sitting somewhere for too long, and then can reach out to that organization or agency or hospital and say, hey, it looks like you have an alert that you were supposed to pick up this kit 34 days ago and it's still sitting there, and kind of act as a prompt. And that really was designed to prevent evidence from being lost, and for there not to be, evidence and sexual assault kits just sitting out there. And it really helps to provide survivors with that access to the information without having to really engage if they don't want to.
And Heather, I'm glad that you brought that up, about the tracking system, because some people who might be listening to this, watching in the future, are like, I remember in the news, they never test those things. And that's why the tracking system was put in place, to make sure that they're moving through and someone's responsible for those kits throughout.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. We always try to stay right on the button here for this lunch session. For those of you out there that are watching that are finding this helpful, if you have been a victim, your choices are being supported by all of these fantastic organizations. You can do as little or as much as you're comfortable with. And if for some reason you're uncomfortable with the service that you're getting somewhere, go somewhere else. Call us. Call, one of us that are here, and we will help to get you to the right place. But you get to make some decisions in this, whether it be now or 75 years from now. You should be supported, and there are a lot of organizations that are out here trying to help. If this has nothing to do with you, fantastic, great news. Share it anyway. You don't know who you're helping out there. You don't know who's been kind of lingering, overthinking all the things, because it's what many of us do. And if you have been a victim and do need mental health services, we do have services at Maryland Crime Victims that are supported, that are grant funded. And we can do as little or as much with you as well. So don't feel that you're underinsured or, what have you. There are so many organizations that can help you. So thank you so much for joining us. We will see you guys next month. And we appreciate Heather, Jessica, Chris, of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.